You're listening to Mia Horror Stories, and today's story is My Shadow Has Started Pointing at Things I Can't See. The screen will stay completely black, letting your imagination do all the work. No visuals, no noise, just a story that creeps under your skin. Don't skip a second, because every detail builds to the chilling end you won't want to miss. The first time it happened, I blamed the wind. I was halfway across the crosswalk at Bedford Avenue and North 7th. The little white walking man blinking like it was getting impatient with me when my shadow, long and narrow in the late afternoon, did something it wasn't supposed to do. The sun was behind me, warm on the back of my neck, and my shadow should have been a clean cutout. Head, shoulders, arms at my sides, the tote bag bumping my hip. Instead, it raised its right arm and pointed. Not a vague tilt, not the kind of illusion you can talk yourself into if you stare too long. A straight, intentional line, index finger, extended, aimed at the curb across the street, just to the right of a stack of green plastic milk crates outside a corner bodega. Like it was trying to get my attention. I stopped so hard a guy behind me said, "Yo," and had to stutter step around my heel. A seedy bike bell chirped. Bus exhaled at the stop, and the smell of diesel and hot rubber pushed in, cutting through the sweetness of someone's vanilla vape. I looked where the shadow pointed. Nothing, just a puddle drying in a dark patch, a crushed paper cup, a cigarette butt mashed into the gutter. Then the arm snapped back to my side like it had never moved. My shadow returned to being mine. The walking man flipped to the red hand, and the rest of the crosswalk filled with the soft rush of cars. "Everything okay?" a woman asked as she passed, her voice flat with New York politeness, the kind that means, "I'm not actually stopping." "Yeah," I said, because that's what you say when you don't want to become a story someone tells later. "Sorry," my phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't check it right away. I crossed the rest of the street on red because the next wave of people did, and I followed them like a school of fish. On the far curb, I stepped out of the traffic flow and did the thing you do when your brain starts scanning for explanations. I tested. I shifted my weight. My shadow shifted. I lifted my arm. It lifted its arm, mirroring perfectly. I made a fist. It made a fist. I wagged a finger like I was scolding a child. It wagged a finger. Normal. A laugh tried to come out of me and turned into a breath. I told myself, trick of the light. Uneven pavement. Something in the corner of my eye that made my brain stitch movement where there wasn't any. That was plausible. That was survivable. But the image stuck. The clean line of that pointing arm. The feeling, not fear exactly, more like irritation that something had broken a rule without asking. My phone buzzed again. I finally pulled it out. "MARA, you're still coming tonight, right?" I stared at the text a second too long, thumb hovering. Tonight was her birthday dinner. Not a big party, just 8 of us at a place in Greenpoint she'd picked because the cocktails had tiny sprigs of herbs, and she liked saying, "It's on Franklin." Mara always said street names like she was introducing you to someone important. I typed back, "Yeah, running a little late from work, be there." I hit send, then shoved the phone away like the whole subject of time was contagious. My name is Eli Hart. I'm 34. I do user research for a health tech company, which means I ask strangers to tell me about their pain. And then I turn their answers into bullet points that managers can nod at. I live in Williamsburg, in a one-bedroom that smells faintly like old radiator heat and the downstairs neighbors cooking. It's fine. It's mine. And I've been trying quietly, privately, not to become the kind of person who cancels on plans because he'd rather sit alone and scroll until his eyes blur. Also, I have this thing where I notice patterns. It's useful at work. It's less useful at 3 a.m. I started walking again, moving with a careful looseness like I was trying not to startle my own body. My tote bag had my laptop and a book I hadn't opened in weeks. The book's spine dug into my side through the canvas. The street was loud in a way that wasn't aggressive, just constant. Car tires on imperfect asphalt, a skateboard's hollow clack as it hit a crack, snippets of conversations in English and Spanish, and something I didn't place, the wet hiss of an espresso machine when someone opened a cafe door. People spilled out of the L stop like the train was still inside them. I kept glancing down, not directly, just enough to catch my shadow in the lower edge of my vision. It behaved. It followed. At home, I did what I always do when my day feels slightly wrong. I tried to correct it with routine. Shoes off by the door, hand on the wall to steady myself as I bent to untie them, my left ankle still stiff, sometimes, from a bad sprain last year. Keys in the bowl, water in the kettle. I stood at the kitchen window, watching the alley behind the building where a guy sometimes practiced trumpet badly, and someone else sometimes screamed into a phone at midnight, and I let my eyes unfocus. The light in my apartment was thin and angled. Late afternoon in winter means the sun acts like it's leaving early on purpose. My shadow fell across the scuffed hardwood, stretching toward the bathroom door. It looked normal. The kettle clicked off. I poured the water, dropped in a tea bag, watched the string darken where it touched the surface. The smell of bergamot rose and settled into the room. My shoulders dropped a little. Then, because I couldn't help it, I tested again. I stepped closer to the window. The shadow sharpened. I raised my arm slowly. It raised its arm slowly. "Okay," I said out loud, just to fill the room with something that wasn't my own breathing. "Okay." A knock sounded from the hallway. Not loud, 2 quick taps, then a pause, then one more, like whoever it was didn't want to be annoying, but also didn't want to be ignored. I opened the door to find my neighbor leaning in the frame across from mine, holding a plastic grocery bag with something clinking inside. He was the kind of man who looked permanently apologetic for existing in shared spaces. Jonas Keller, 41, male, stood there in a navy hoodie and jeans that had a faint grease mark on the thigh. His hair was going gray at the temples, and he had the tired eyes of someone who wakes up early for work, even on weekends. "Hey," he said, lifting the bag slightly. "Sorry. This came for you. It was on my mat." He handed it over. Inside was a bottle of olive oil, one of the fancy ones I'd ordered after my last cheap bottle tasted like nothing. The label was in Italian, which always makes me feel like I'm pretending. "Thanks," I said. "I appreciate it." "No problem." Jonas's gaze flicked down, just a normal glance, not lingering toward the floor between us, where the hallway light cast both of our shadows into the apartment behind me. For a second, his eyebrows lifted, like he'd registered something, and then immediately corrected himself. "You good?" he asked, too quickly. "Yeah." My voice came out higher than I wanted. I tried again. "Yeah, just long day." Jonas nodded like that made sense, like he had a mental file labeled long day and he could slide me into it. He started to turn, then paused. "You going out?" he asked, looking past me at my coat on the hook. "Birthday dinner," I said. "A friend, Greenpoint." "Nice." I had a smile. It didn't fully arrive. "It's cold out. Watch the sidewalks. They're slick by the curb." "I will," I said, and I meant it. He left. His footsteps faded down the hallway with the soft shuffle of someone in socks. I closed my door and stood with my hand still on the knob, listening to the building settle, a distant toilet flush, the low hum of someone's TV through a wall, the radiator pinging as it warmed. I looked down again. My shadow lay across the floorboards, angled toward the kitchen. For a few heartbeats, it didn't move at all, even though I shifted my weight. Then it jerked just a little, like a delayed reaction catching up. My stomach tightened, not fear still, more like my body taking inventory and finding an item missing. I set the olive oil on the counter. I took my phone out, opened the camera, and aimed it at the floor like I was making a stupid art film. On the screen, the shadow was there, mine, normal. It did what I did. When I raised my arm, it raised its arm. I lowered the phone. With my eyes on the floor, the shadow seemed fractionally behind, like a video with the audio slightly out of sync. It didn't point. It didn't do anything dramatic. It just made me feel like my apartment had developed a small mechanical problem that might get worse if I ignored it. My phone buzzed again. "MARA, we're ordering apps." "Where are you?" I typed, leaving in 10. I stared at the message before I sent it. 10 minutes was optimistic. I still hadn't showered. My hair was doing that thing where it stuck up in the back like a question mark. But I didn't want to be the person who says, "Actually, I'm having a weird day and I don't feel like being in public," because that person me has used that line too many times. In the bathroom, the light was harsh and honest. I washed my face, watched the water run off my chin. My reflection looked normal. Tired, yes. Little red line on my nose from my glasses. A couple days of stubble. Nothing alarming. I dried my face and glanced down. The bathroom light threw my shadow onto the tile. It was sharp, small, pinned under me. It lifted its arm, slowly, pointed toward the bathtub. I froze, towel in my hands. The pointing finger aimed at the tub's edge, right where the shower curtain bunched. The curtain was cheap plastic with a pattern of blue lines that always looked like swimming pool tiles. My heart thudded once, hard, like it had been tapped. I didn't move because I didn't want to give it the satisfaction of being right, whatever it was. The shadow held the point. The house, my building, my life kept making its regular sounds around me. Radiator, distant footsteps, a faint siren outside that dopplered and softened. I swallowed. My throat felt tight, like I'd been talking too much. I could pull the curtain back, check the tub, prove it was nothing. Or I could grab my coat, leave the bathroom light on, and go meet my friends like a normal person, and let whatever this was become tomorrow's problem. I stood there, towel damp against my palms, and felt the choice settle in my chest like a coin that hadn't landed yet. I didn't pull the shower curtain. I turned off the bathroom light instead. The room went dim and forgiving, the way it does when you deny it information. The pointing stopped because the shadow vanished, and that felt like a solution even though it wasn't one. I got dressed fast. Jeans, sweater, coat. I left the olive oil on the counter like a bookmark. As I locked the door behind me, I told myself out loud again that I was late and being dramatic. and that whatever this was would still be here when I got back. The stairwell smelled like dust and old paint. My shadow flickered ahead of me on the steps as the motion sensor lights lagged, then snapped on. It behaved. I watched it like a bad driver watches their mirrors, hyper-aware, but pretending not to be. Outside, the cold cut through my sweater. The sky had that washed-out steel color that means snow later, maybe. I walked fast toward the subway, boots careful on the slick parts near the curb like Jonas had said. My ankle complained, a low ache that made me favor it. On the platform, my phone buzzed again. MARA, they're holding the table for 10 more. After that, we lose it. There it was. The clock. The thing I'm bad at. I typed back on my way, because that's also the thing I say when I'm not. The L train roared in, wind whipping my coat around my legs. I stepped in with everyone else, found a pole, wedged myself between a guy with headphones and a woman scrolling through photos of a dog. The doors closed. The car lurched. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The floor was gritty with salt. My shadow pooled under me, broken by shoes and bags, anonymous. It didn't point. I exhaled. Lorimer, someone shoved past me to get out. My foot slid a little. Pain flared bright in my ankle, sharp enough to make me gasp. I grabbed the pole harder than necessary. Sorry, the guy muttered, already gone. It wasn't bad, no pop, no collapse, but the ache deepened, and with it that old fear, the body failing at an inconvenient time. I shifted my weight carefully, trying to distribute it. The train stalled between stops. Not long. 30 seconds, maybe. Long enough for the lights to flicker. In that flicker, my shadow did it again. It pulled away from my feet and angled itself, arm lifting with a patience that made my stomach drop. The finger pointed not at the floor, but at the emergency intercom panel near the door. I stared. The lights steadied. The shadow snapped back into place, fractured again by the crowd. A woman across from me noticed my stare. She frowned, defensive. I looked away. This train is being held momentarily, the conductor's voice crackled. We'll be moving shortly. I swallowed. My phone felt heavy in my hand. I didn't want to be the person who hits the intercom because of a feeling. I didn't want to be late because of a feeling. I didn't want to be wrong. The train moved. The doors opened at Bedford. I limped off with everyone else, adrenaline making my ankle feel worse than it probably was. Upstairs, the night had settled in earnest. Streetlights cast long, sharp shadows that overlapped and broke and reformed with every passing car. I walked toward Franklin Avenue, slower now. Each step sent a small pulse up my leg. My phone buzzed again. MARA, we might have to reorder. Are you close? I'm close, I muttered to no one. I checked the map anyway, like it might change. As I passed a row of parked cars, my shadow stretched along their sides, warped and multiplied. It looked like a crowd following me. I kept my eyes forward. At the corner of Franklin and Kent, I almost didn't see him. A man was crouched by a bike rack, fumbling with a U-lock. His hood was up, but I recognized the navy hoodie anyway. Jonas, I said, surprised into stopping. He looked up, startled. His face was pale, eyes bright in the streetlight. Oh, hey, he said. He stood too quickly, then steadied himself with a hand on the rack. Sorry, didn't hear you. You okay? I asked, because apparently that's my line now. Yeah. He gestured vaguely at the bike. Lock jammed, of course. His shadow lay long behind him, pointing down the street. Mine lay beside it. You heading out? He asked. Dinner, I said. You? Work thing, he said, then corrected himself. Actually, no. I was heading back, forgot my keys again. He laughed, but it didn't land. I shifted my weight. Pain spiked. I hissed before I could stop myself. Ankle, Jonas asked, immediately attentive. Old injury, I said. Just twinged it. He nodded like he understood more than that. He bent again, tugged at the lock. It didn't budge. You want help? I asked. He hesitated. Maybe just hold it steady. I stepped closer, braced the bike with my good leg. Our shadows overlapped on the sidewalk, merged into a shape that wasn't either of us. For a second, just a second, it looked like the combined shadow angled away, pointing down Franklin, toward the darker stretch where the street dipped under the overpass. I sucked in a breath. Jonas yanked harder. The lock gave with a metallic snap that made us both flinch. There, he said, relief flooding his voice. Thanks. No problem, I said, heart still racing. He swung a leg over the bike, then paused. You sure you're okay to walk? I'm fine, I said automatically. Then, because lying felt worse, I'll make it. Listen, he said, lowering his voice. This is going to sound weird. I waited. I thought I saw something earlier in the hallway. He trailed off, shook his head. Never mind. Long day. My phone buzzed again, insistent. MARA, they're giving our table away in 2. I have to go, I said, sharper than I meant to. Sorry, Jonas nodded, but his gaze flicked down again to the pavement between us. His jaw tightened. Eli, he said, if you notice anything else off, just don't ignore it, okay? I won't, I said, even as the words felt like a promise I couldn't keep. He rode off, tires whispering over the wet asphalt. I stood there alone, shadows stretching and shifting around me. My ankle throbbed. My phone buzzed again, then again, the screen lighting my face. I started toward the restaurant, then stopped. My shadow had pulled ahead of me, elongated by a passing car's headlights. It pointed, clearly this time, toward the underpass, where the streetlights were dimmer, and the sound changed, echoing and hollow. I looked at my phone. 2 missed calls now. The time glared back at me. I could keep going, make the dinner, apologize, ice my ankle later. Or I could follow the pointing, just far enough to prove once and for all that it was nothing, before whatever this was decided for me. A siren wailed somewhere to the east. Snowflakes started to fall, sparse and tentative, melting as soon as they hit the ground. I took a step toward the underpass. Pain flared. My phone rang again. I let it ring as I made the choice. I turned down Franklin instead of toward the restaurant. The sound changed immediately. Cars above the overpass made a low, rolling thunder, like weather passing through concrete. The street dipped and narrowed, the buildings pulling back just enough to make the light feel thinner. Sodium lamps buzzed overhead. A puddle reflected the underside of the bridge in broken orange pieces. My phone buzzed again. I silenced it without looking. Each step sent a sharp reminder up my ankle, the joint stiffening, as if it resented being asked to do anything extra tonight. Just a look, I said quietly. Then I'm done. My shadow stayed ahead of me, stretched and distorted by the angle of the lights. It didn't point now. It just waited. Under the overpass, the sidewalk sloped unevenly. Graffiti layered over older graffiti, names and symbols half erased. The smell was damp concrete and old trash. Somewhere water dripped in a steady rhythm. I scanned the area, trying to see what the shadow had seen. There were the usual things: a shopping cart tipped on its side, a broken pallet, a pile of black garbage bags stacked neatly like they were waiting for instructions. No movement, no person, No obvious hazard. My heart rate slowed a notch. Embarrassment crept in, warm and itchy. "Great," I muttered. "You followed a vibe." I took my phone out and turned on the flashlight, sweeping it across the ground. The beam caught a flash of white near the curb. For a second, my brain leapt bone, teeth, something wrong. It was a sneaker, just a sneaker. One of those foam slides, scuffed and abandoned. I laughed, a short, humorless sound. The flashlight beam shook a little in my hand. Attempt 1, I thought. Done. Solved. Nothing here. I turned to leave, and my shadow pointed again. This time it wasn't dramatic. Just a subtle angle, the arm lifting partway, finger aimed toward a darker pocket behind the stacked garbage bags, where the light didn't quite reach. My mouth went dry. "Okay," I said, louder now, like volume might make this rational. "Okay." I limped closer, flashlight beam jittering over the bags. They were tied tight, black plastic shiny with moisture. The smell was stronger here, sour and sweet at the same time. Behind them was a recessed doorway I hadn't noticed before. A service entrance, maybe, half hidden by the bridge support. The metal door was shut, paint flaking, a red and white sign bolted to it. No admittance. Authorized personnel only. Mine was crooked, one screw missing. The shadow's finger aimed straight at the door handle. "Absolutely not," I said. I took a step back. My ankle buckled slightly, pain flaring hot enough to make my eyes water. I grabbed the bridge column to steady myself, palms scraping against rough concrete, breathing hard now. Cold air burning my lungs. This was the line. I could feel it. A locked door under an overpass is not a mystery. It's a liability. This was my brain trying to turn stress into narrative. I turned away from the door, from the pointing shadow, and started back toward the streetlight glow. My phone rang. I glanced at the screen before I could stop myself. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I pictured a robocall, a scam, but my thumb slid anyway. "Hello, Eli," a man's voice, uncertain, familiar. "Jonas." "Yeah, sorry. I found your number in the building group chat. I didn't know if are you okay?" I looked back at the door. The shadow still pointed. "I'm fine," I said, lying again. "Why, he hesitated, breath audible. "I'm at the bike rack by Kent. I thought I saw you head this way, toward the underpass." "I did," I said. "I'm just checking something." "Eli," he said, and now his voice was firmer. "That area's restricted. There was a gas line issue here last year. They closed that service door because what?" I waited. "Because someone got hurt," he finished. "They never fixed the latch properly." As always, the phone crackled. A car passed overhead, drowning him out. "Jonas," I said. "It doesn't always what? Lock," he said. "It doesn't always lock." My heart thudded. "I'm coming," he added quickly. "Don't touch anything, just stay where you are." "I'm not a child," I snapped, then immediately regretted it. "I mean, I'm not touching it." "Good," he said. "I'm 2 minutes away." I hung up and shoved the phone into my pocket. My hands were shaking now, fine tremors I couldn't control. I tried to slow my breathing. Attempt 2, I thought. Call for backup. Wait it out. The waiting made everything louder. The drip of water, the hum of traffic, my own pulse in my ears. Something moved behind the door, not a shape, a sound. A dull thud, followed by a faint metallic rattle. I froze. The flashlight beam wavered. "Hello," I called, hating how thin my voice sounded. Another sound. This one clearer. Like someone dragging something heavy across a floor. My mind filled in images before I could stop it. A trapped person, injured, trying to get help. A generator failing. A collapse, a body. The shadow's finger didn't move. I stepped closer despite myself, heart hammering. The door handle was inches from my hand. It was scratched, paint worn down to metal where fingers had grabbed it too often. "Hey," I said again. "Is someone in there?" Silence. Then a loud clang made me jump back, ankle screaming. I cried out, catching myself on the wall, breath knocked out of me. The door shuddered once, then went still. I pressed my back against the concrete, chest heaving. My ankle throbbed in waves now, sharp and deep. Sweat prickled along my hairline despite the cold. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." I waited. 30 seconds. A minute. Nothing. The sound, when it came again, was unmistakable. A rat. It squeezed through a gap near the bottom of the door, fur slick and dark, eyes catching the flashlight beam. It paused, whiskers twitching, then darted past my foot and disappeared into the shadows. I sagged with relief so strong it made me dizzy. A laugh bubbled up, half hysterical. "That's it," I said aloud. "That's what you're doing to me." The misdirection deflated something in my chest. I felt stupid, human again. I pushed off the wall and turned away from the door for good. That's when I noticed the smell. It wasn't garbage. It wasn't damp concrete. It was gas. Faint, but unmistakable. That rotten egg edge that doesn't belong anywhere except warnings and emergency drills. I froze mid-step. My shadow, stretched long by a passing car, lifted its arm one last time and pointed not at the door now, but at the small metal valve mounted on the wall beside it. The valve that was turned just a few degrees off center. Behind me, footsteps pounded on concrete. "Eli," Jonas shouted. And above us, somewhere in the structure of the bridge, something sparked. The streetlights flickered. The darkness surged closer. There was no going back the way I'd come. Not fast enough. The spark didn't become an explosion. It became a soft, terrifying whoop, a brief bloom of orange light under the bridge, like someone had cupped a flame in their hands and then crushed it out. Heat washed my face. The smell of burning dust and hair snapped through the gas stink. "Down," Jonas yelled. I dropped without thinking, bad ankle screaming as it folded under me. My palms slapped the wet concrete. Something stung my cheek. The streetlight above us died with a pop, plunging the underpass into a dim, sodium afterglow from farther down the block. Silence followed. Not the cinematic kind, just the sudden absence of traffic noise, as if the bridge had held its breath. I lay there, heart battering my ribs, counting without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. "Eli," Jonas said, closer now. "Talk to me." "I'm here," I said. My voice sounded wrong in my ears. "I'm here." He crouched beside me, one knee down. His hoodie smelled faintly singed. He ran his hands over my shoulders, my arms, quick and practiced, checking. "My face?" I asked. "Red," he said. "Not bad, you?" My ankles shot. "Yeah," he said. "I saw." I pushed myself up to a seated position, leaning back against the bridge column. The world swam for a second and then steadied. The gas smell was still there, lighter now, like it had been stirred. The valve. I looked where the shadow had pointed last, toward the small metal knob on the wall beside the service door. In the dim light, I could see the notch on its face, still angled wrong. "We have to shut it," I said. Jonas shook his head. "We have to get out." "And then what?" I snapped, sharper than I meant to. "Wait for it to light again." He opened his mouth, closed it. The traffic noise began to seep back in above us, tentative, like the city testing whether it was allowed to keep going. "You call 911, I said. "Tell them gas leak under Franklin." "You'll what?" he said. "You can't stand." I tried anyway. pain flared white and hot. I bit back a sound and slumped. "I can crawl," I said, which was stupid, and we both knew it. Jonas looked at the valve, then at the service door. He swore under his breath. "The latch," he said. "If the line's pressurized wrong, closing it too fast could spark," I finished, remembering the intercom, the warnings, the way my job trained me to complete other people's sentences with worst-case scenarios. He pulled his phone out, thumb already moving. "I'm calling it in." "No," I said, and then softer, "Wait." The gas smell surged again, stronger this time. Somewhere metal creaked, expanding with heat or cold or pressure, I couldn't tell. The shadow at my feet stretched as headlights passed, snapping and reforming. In the jittery light, it angled toward the valve again. Not dramatic, insistent. "I know," Jonas said, mistaking my look. "I know it feels, Jonas," I said. "Listen to me." The spark came from above, right? A loose wire, not the valve. He hesitated. "If we shut it slowly," I said, "and ground ourselves, touch the wall, keep contact." "You don't know that," he said. "I know the alternative," I said, and my voice broke. "Please." For a long second, all I could hear was my own breathing and the drip of water somewhere deeper under the bridge. Then Jonas nodded once. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I'll do it. You stay back." "I'm staying right here," I said, pressing my palm flat against the concrete. It was cold, gritty, real. He shrugged out of his hoodie, revealing a thin t-shirt underneath, and wrapped the hoodie around his hand. He approached the valve slowly, one hand braced on the wall, the other hovering. 911's already dialed, he said. "If this goes bad," I hit send. "Slow," I said, "slow." He closed his eyes for half a second, then put his wrapped hand on the valve and began to turn it, a millimeter at a time. The metal squealed softly, a sound that made my teeth ache. The gas smell lessened. My chest loosened a fraction. Halfway, a car passed overhead, its headlights flaring. The shadow leapt. Jonas froze, hand still on the valve. "Don't stop," I said. "That's worse." He swallowed and kept turning. There was another spark above us, smaller this time, more of a spit. Jonas flinched, but didn't let go. The valve turned home with a dull thunk. The smell faded, retreating like a tide. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then my phone vibrated violently in my pocket, the screen lighting the underside of the bridge with a frantic blue. I let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Jonas stepped back, sagging against the wall. He slid down until he was sitting beside me, knees pulled up, breathing hard. "Jesus," he said, "Jesus." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, overlapping fire, then police. The city had decided we were a problem worth paying attention to. "You should have left," Jonas said, staring at the valve like it might move again. "You should have gone to your dinner." I thought of Mara's calls, the apps arriving cold, the way I'd silenced my phone like I could mute consequences. "I don't think I could have," I said. The firefighters arrived first, moving fast and loud, radios crackling, boots slapping concrete. They took over with the efficiency of people who train for this exact shape of chaos. Someone checked the valve. Someone else waved a detector wand that beeped angrily, then softened. A paramedic knelt in front of me, asking my name, my age, where it hurt. She pressed fingers into my ankle, and I yelped despite myself. "Probably a fracture," she said, not unkindly. "We'll splint it." They wrapped my ankle tight, the pressure a relief. When they lifted me onto the stretcher, the world tilted, and I caught sight of my shadow on the underside of the bridge, short now, broken by straps and hands. It didn't point. It just lay there attached. As they rolled me toward the ambulance, I saw Jonas arguing quietly with a police officer, gesturing toward the valve, the door, the bridge. He looked small under the lights, shoulders hunched. In the ambulance, the doors closed and the noise softened. The medic checked my vitals. My phone buzzed again, and this time I looked. "Mara, are you okay?" I heard sirens. I typed back with shaking fingers, "I'm alive, I'm sorry." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. The ambulance lurched into motion. Outside, the city resumed its rhythm, altered just enough to remind me that it could break rules without asking. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, my shadow on the ambulance wall shifted as the vehicle turned. For a split second, just long enough to make my stomach drop, it seemed to lag behind. Then it caught up. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and burned coffee. It was quiet in the way places get after midnight, when the drama has either resolved or moved somewhere else. My ankle was wrapped in layers of gauze and a temporary splint that made it feel bigger than it was, like a poorly packed suitcase. Every so often it throbbed, a dull reminder that I'd made choices with consequences. Resident came by with a tablet and a tired smile and said hairline fracture lucky, and then said no weight bearing for a few weeks, and then said, "Do you have someone who can take you home?" I said yes, because Jonas was sitting in the plastic chair by the wall, hoodie back on now, hands folded between his knees like he was waiting to be called into a principal's office. He stood when the resident left. "They're done with statements," he said. "Fire department, police." The gas company guy was not happy. I nodded, the valve, the report. The neat boxes my job taught me people like to check after something almost goes wrong. "Did they?" I stopped, tried again. "Did they say how it happened?" Jonas shrugged. "Officially, pending investigation. Unofficially," he rubbed his face. "That service door gets used by contractors. Someone probably left the valve cracked. Add one loose wire," and he made a small exploding gesture with his fingers, then seemed to regret it. "Someone will get fined," I said. "Someone always does," he said. Mara arrived 10 minutes later, coat half-buttoned, hair pulled back like she'd done it in a hurry. She smelled like rosemary and citrus, restaurant air clinging to her. "You're an idiot," she said, and then she hugged me carefully, arms awkward around the splint. Her voice shook. "Don't do that again." "I didn't plan to," I said. She pulled back and looked at my face, tilting it toward the light. "You're singed." "Adds character," Jonas said, trying for levity. Mara eyed him, then softened. "Thank you," she said, "for staying with him." Jonas nodded. He didn't say of course, which I appreciated. The discharge process took forever. Paperwork. A prescription for pain I knew I wouldn't finish. A sheet of exercises I wouldn't start right away. When they wheeled me out, the night had gone soft and misty. Snow dusted the curb in patches, already gray with city. The underpass was taped off when we passed it on the slow route home, flashing lights painting the concrete in alternating colors. I didn't look down. I didn't need to. At my apartment, Jonas helped me up the stairs one slow step at a time. My ankle protested, but it held. He set me on the couch and brought me water, set my phone on the table within reach. "I'll check on you tomorrow," he said, hovering near the door. "If that's okay." "Please," I said. When he left, the apartment felt bigger than it had that morning. Quieter. I lay back and stared at the ceiling fan, off, dust visible on the blades in the lamplight. My shadow fell faintly on the wall, rounded and indistinct. I slept in short, strange bursts. In the morning, my phone was full of messages. Mara's apology for snapping. My manager's careful, take the time you need. A number I didn't recognize that turned out to be a city investigator asking me to confirm times and locations. Answered what I could. I didn't mention the shadow. There was no box for that. The days that followed settled into a rhythm I didn't choose, but learned anyway. Ice packs, elevating my ankle on pillows, remote work that blurred together. Jonas stopped by with groceries and news clippings about the underpass, shaking his head at the language. Potential hazard mitigated, no injuries reported. I let that go. Once, on a video call, my camera froze and my image lagged behind my voice by half a second. I laughed it off, but my hands were cold for an hour afterward. Physical therapy started the next week. The room smelled like rubber mats and disinfectant. The therapist, a woman with a no-nonsense ponytail, pressed on my ankle and said, "Tell me when it hurts." I did. She nodded like pain was a language she spoke fluently. "Your brain will try to protect you," she said, as if reading my mind. "You'll hesitate. That's normal. We'll work through it." Outside, winter did what it always does, wore everything down to essentials. The city moved on. The tape came down. The underpass reopened with a new lock on the service door and a brighter light installed overhead. Someone had painted over the graffiti, leaving a blank patch that felt louder than the tags had. The first time I walked past it again, cane tapping the sidewalk, I didn't stop. I kept my eyes on the far curb, the rhythm of my steps. My shadow followed, obedient. Mostly. At home, life returned to its small, manageable problems. The radiator hissed. The olive oil went rancid before I remembered to use it. Mara and I rescheduled dinner and laughed about the cold apps. I told her the story in pieces, leaving out the parts that didn't fit. One evening, weeks later, I stood at the kitchen counter chopping onions. The light was wrong, late, angled, familiar. My shadow stretched across the floor toward the hallway. I lifted my arm. It lifted its arm. I turned the knife flat and slid it into the drawer. I washed my hands and dried them carefully, watching the movements mirror me. When I turned off the light and the shadow disappeared, relief came like a quiet exhale. I don't think it was ever supernatural. I tell myself that, and it helps. Stress does things. Injury does things. Your brain stitches warnings together from fragments and throws them ahead of you like flares. Sometimes they're right. Sometimes they're early. I walk slower now. I pay attention to infrastructure, to the smell of gas, to the sound of electricity where it shouldn't be. I answer my phone. Every so often, though, when the light flickers just so, when I'm tired and the city hums and my ankle aches with weather, I get the sense of being a half beat behind myself, of something already knowing where to look. When that happens, I stop. I look, and I decide what to do next. That's it for this nightmare. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and turn on notifications. It really helps keep the stories alive. And don't stop here. Dive into another one of our videos and keep the fear going.